Now, sending a request to the API route works just as sending a request to any API, to any backend, works in React. In our new Meetup form component, we call onAddMeetup on props to pass our collected data there. And in the end, therefore, we need to go to the component that uses new Meetup form to work with that data. And that is our new Meetup page. There we have this add Meetup handler, which gets this collected data. And therefore, it's here where we now want to send a request to our API route. And we can send a request just as we know it, for example with the built-in fetch function or with a third-party package like Axios. Now here I'll use the fetch function, and I want to use async await, so I will turn this into an async function and await the response here. And then we need to insert the URL to which we want to send a request. Now often that is some domain.com and then some path if it's an external API. But here it's of course an internal API, which will be hosted by the same server as is being used for serving this page. And therefore, we just can construct an absolute path here to send a request to the same server but a different path on that server. And the path is /API, because it's this special API folder, and then the file name, so /meetup, a new meetup, without the file extension. And if you named this JavaScript file differently here, you need to use a different name here as well. This will now send a request to this new meetup.js file in the API folder, and it will then trigger this function. Next.js will trigger this function for us when a request reaches this path. Now we actually do need to send a post request because we're not doing anything for different kinds of requests. And hence here we need to use this second argument, which we can pass to fetch to configure this request. And for example, we can set the method key to post here. We then should also add the body, the data attached to this request. And that has to be a JavaScript object which carries the data which we want to store in our database. A title, an image, an address, and a description field. Now here, entered meetup data, which we're getting from new meetup form, does have those fields already. It has a title, image, address, and description field. And since that's the case, in the end we can simply pass entered meetup data as a body. However, not like this, but instead we need to convert it to JSON, which we can do with the built-in JSON stringify method. Then we can also add some headers to make it clear that we're sending JSON data by adding the content type header and setting this to application JSON. And with that, our request is configured and will be sent. Eventually, we then get a response, and we can then also get data from that response if we want to. Just like this, as we always do it for responses we get from the fetch function. And then we can work with that data. But here I'm not interested in it, so we'll just log that data. If we do all of that, if we save all the files, and if we ensured that MongoDB whitelisted our local IP and that the credentials for connecting to the database are correct, if we did all of that, we should be able to go back to our form here and reload, open the DevTools, and then enter our data here, like a first meetup. And then I will again grab this URL, which I picked before, and insert this here as an image. And then some address, some street 5, some city, and this is a first meetup as a description. And if I now click add meetup, we see this response eventually, which is looking good, because meetup inserted is the message we're sending back from the API route. And if we go to MongoDB, to our cluster, and click on collections, there we should then actually also see a meetups database. And you might not see the other databases here, because I created more databases in this cluster, but you should see a meetups database with a meetups collection, and in there you should see one meetup with the data you just added and an automatically generated ID. And that's our API route in action and how we can send a request to it. Now, of course, we now probably want to navigate away after we added a meetup, and therefore, back in the new meetup page here, so not the API route, but the front-end facing page, after we got our response here, we might want to navigate away programmatically, and we learned how that worked. We can use the use router hook and import it from next router, therefore, to get access to that router object. And once we got that, here after logging maybe, we can navigate away with the push method, or here maybe also with the replace method to make sure we can't go back with the back button if you want to ensure that that's not possible. Here I don't want to do that, and hence I'll just push this and then go back to just /nothing, so to the starting page, let's say. And then with that, if we save this and I then enter a second meetup here and the image link again, 2nd Street 2, this is the 2nd Street. If we do all of that, click add meetup, you see eventually we're navigated away. And of course we could also show a loading spinner and do all of that, but that's then all just client-side standard React, nothing Next.js specific about it. The Next.js specific part was this API route, and as you see, that route is now working just fine.